morning. Thank you to those of you who are joining us today. It's like a beautiful sunny Friday morning, and so I applaud you for taking some educational time out of your day when it might be easy to play hooky. My name is Courtney Burgee Swanson, and I work for STIDA. And I've had the pleasure of working with several of my colleagues to put together this series, Growing Stronger Together, which is part of our HEN program, Harvest Entrepreneur Network, which is a new program that we launched this year to help farmers in rural Minnesota get access to some one-on-one technical assistance and coaching, as well as host a series of what we hoped would have been in-person events and gatherings, but we've kind of shifted to an online format. So this is part of that program. And I think some of you in here are actually signed up to be part of the HEN program. And so welcome to you all. And if you're not and you're interested, we did just reopen our application process. So you can get access to a free coach. We can help with business planning, writing grants, just kind of generally connecting with resources. The link that I put in the chat has the link for the application, as well as the previously recorded webinars, a new toolkit. We have a lot of resources that we're trying to get up on that website. So thank you again for being here. And I'm really excited. This has been highly anticipated this morning to welcome Rachel Armstrong from Farm Commons to present for us. Rachel will give a little bit of a background on what Farm Commons does, but essentially they are really devoted to helping farmers. They're a nonprofit, and they have a lot of really great resources, and I would really encourage you to check out their website if you haven't already. And so she's going to be walking us through some kind of a framework of navigating legal structures for farm businesses, and several folks sent in questions in advance, and we've actually integrated those into the presentation. But as we go, we will be taking questions in the chat, and I see we already have one from Chandra asking about working with hemp farmers. And so that's a great example of, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll try to address them as we go, so this can be kind of a dialogue and an engaging presentation. And then at the end too, we'll also maybe have a couple minutes to answer questions if you kind of need some time to mull things over, but please, we do encourage you to use the chat as we go. And I think we're going to do just a quick introduction, but I'll have Rachel kick that off. So I'll hand it over to you, Rachel, and thanks again for being here.
All right. And thank you, everybody, for coming around to listen today. I'm with Farm Commons. You got to go to our website, farmcommons.org, and you can also find us on the social stuff, although I'll admit I'm not much with the social stuff myself, but I know that we have those things, so go check it out. Building resilience through business structures for Minnesota farms and businesses. So hopefully you found yourself in the right place, and that is the subject that you want to talk about today. I know I am excited to talk about that. But who am I? Well, my name is Rachel Armstrong. I grew up in northern Minnesota. I live here now. I live in Duluth. This is where my family has, 5 generations ago, we came here to farm. And that's an actual picture of, farming back in the day. My ancestors, you can see the nice cutover in the background, the logging. Farm Commons is an organization that I founded, went to law school in order to do that, after I realized, hey, our community really needs access to legal information. Sure, we can go pay an attorney for that, but it's not really happening. We're not doing that. We're not getting the information that we really need from attorneys, even when we can afford it. So I thought, okay, there's got to be a better way. Got to be a better way to get some information out there and help folks start to build legal resilience. It's not that attorneys aren't important. They are. It's just, how do we use attorneys in the best possible way to really support our businesses? That's what we're here for. We're here to help you figure out, what do you really need from an attorney? What can you do yourself? And what can you do together with your community to build the resilience that you need? So Farm Commons, our mission is to empower communities to resolve their own legal vulnerabilities within an ecosystem of support. What that looks like is things exactly like this. We create and deliver legal education materials and workshops. We also foster creative problem solving in communities. Sometimes education isn't enough. A problem is too intractable just to educate our way around it. Sometimes what we need to do is we need to create a couple year problem solving strategy to really address something like insurance or difficulties with employment law. So that's what Farm Commons does as well. Where do we get our money? For the most part, we are funded by federal grants and foundations. Like any 501c3 nonprofit, that's where our money comes from. We also earn our revenue by working with other partners. We will develop custom curriculum or programming, and we charge a fee for that to help support our efforts. What I want you to know is that Farm Commons does not make money through the sale of legal services. If you walk away from today's presentation thinking, I'd like an LLC, you can't hire us to do that for you. That's because, well, I mean, there's a few reasons why. Number one, it's not the right way for us to, become more resilient ourselves. But also, we strive to be a trusted and neutral party when it comes to how to use an attorney best. We can't really do that if we're also making money off you using legal services from us. So trust that we are objective when we're talking about what can be done on your own and where do you really need to work with an attorney. So that's a little bit about me. Little personal facts. I have twins that are about to turn 3 years old, and I have a 4-year-old. So we keep very busy around here, and that's my basics. What about you? I would love to hear a little bit more about who's on the line today. If you don't mind, if you could type your name, where you are, what city, what rural locale, and your favorite food in the chat box, that would be very fun. My favorite food is kind of boring. I really like toast, and I like homemade jam. So that's my favorite food. I want you to type your name, your location, and your favorite food in the chat box, in part because I want you to use the chat box. I'm trying to warm you up. Your questions, your thoughts, and your perspectives are important to this conversation. This program is for you. As you have questions, write them in the chat box. We will get to them. Courtney's going to help me see that they are there, and we will be addressing them. Sometimes you might not have a question, but you have a thought, you have a perspective. That's valuable too. Sure, I know some things about business structures that I'm going to share with you. You know some things about your business. You know some things about your community. You know what you want to do and what you don't want to do. That's important. So bring that stuff to this conversation. If you know of a resource that other folks on the line might want, plug that in. So make liberal use of that chat box. I see we have some fans of cheese, chocolate chip brownies, and pizza. I really like that, and any food. I'm on board with that too. There's not many foods I don't eat. Okay, keep it coming in the chat box. And in the meantime, I'm gonna finish my introduction with one more point. I have something to promise you for today's session. And it's a weird thing, but trust me on this. Legal education can reduce risk. It can certainly build stronger communities, and it can create joy. Trust me, it can. So our goal today is to experience each of these things. We are going to learn how we're going to reduce risk in our businesses. We're going to see how we can build stronger communities, and we're going to get just a little taste of some of the joy that we might experience when we go down this path. Legal education is not all about expensive, foreboding, scary, awful details. It really is about building something that you can rely on into the future. Okay, I'm going to start with action steps. Your time is valuable. You don't want to sit here through this whole presentation just to get to the punchline at the end. I'm going to give you the punchline right now. What do you need to do to build a strong business in terms of legal structures? The first thing that you need to do is to write a governance document that creates solutions for you, your partners, and your farms or businesses' needs, circumstances, and expectations. Write a governance document. What is that? How do you write it? You will learn those things in the next 45 minutes. But what I want you to walk away from this saying, thinking in your mind is, the most important way to build legal resilience is to get this document. You can do it, and it won't necessarily cost you a lot of money. I have one more action step. Number 2, form an LLC or S corporation if you are willing to deal with some additional paperwork and you want protection for your personal assets, or you want tax savings when you make more in personal income from farming than the average farmer. Few minutes to let that sink in. So this is number 2. Our first most important action step is writing that organizing document. The second thing, and I'm sorry, I do switch up my terms. Sometimes I say organizing document, sometimes I say governance document. They're the same thing. We'll talk about that. The second thing you can do is form an LLC or an S corporation. But forming an LLC or S corporation is not for everybody. It does require some additional paperwork that you have to adhere to. Your motivations, why is this going to be worth it to you? It's that protection for your personal assets and that tax savings. So that's a little bit of a preview about what you're going to experience today. And we're going to, at the end of our presentation, at the end of our time together, reflect again on which of these 2 action steps, or both, is right for your business at this time. So now on to the details. Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill are boyfriend, girlfriend. They want to start a business together. They're really excited about furthering their relationship and getting started in their small town together. And they're going to go in to raise beef together. Jack has particular skills with the animal side of things, with the livestock. He's been in 4-H. He's excited. His family has some land. Jill's really excited about the business aspects of things. She's more the marketer. She wants to go to the farmer's market. So they get a nice mix of skills. They have a lot of good dreams. They've done some business planning. They've thought about a few things. What could possibly go wrong, right? It's going to be great. They're thinking about it. Well, as we all know, a lot of things can go wrong. When you think about your own community and well-meaning folks who have gone into business together on an agricultural venture or non-agricultural venture, things can go wrong. How? Well, in our line of work, we like to think about the D's. Disability. That's a big one. Oftentimes, farm businesses and other businesses get off track because someone gets hurt. They're not able to work in the same way that they were before. Divorce. Divorce is another D. Jack and Jill get married. Things don't turn out. The farm is eventually, lost in the process of that divorce. Death. Another horrible thing that can and does happen, and it's extremely disruptive and difficult. What about just garden variety disputes? Maybe it doesn't come to divorce, but maybe, Jack's family starts to get upset about the land utilization, and there's a family argument that brews. I don't need to tell you this. You know that these are the things that really disrupt a farm business over time, that disrupt really any business. So if we are thinking about how do we build a business that's really resilient, how do we build a business that is going to survive the long term, we're thinking about those things. We're thinking about what can we do to remain friends, to anticipate problems, to think about those things before they come around, to build stronger communication, to build good budgeting procedures, because we know that money is a big source of where do those disputes come from? Why is divorce so problematic? It comes down to money. So doing things like talking about when we're going to budget, how we're going to make decisions about where we spend our money, that is really where resilience comes from. Imagine a world where all new businesses talked about these things together if they're partners, or even just one person if they're starting a business all by themselves. What does each partner need to contribute to the business? Is it money? Is it labor? And when is that contribution going to be made? How are we compensated for our involvement? Do I get money? Do I just get beef or eggs? Do I get, future ownership? And when do I get those things? If I need money to buy some clothes, or my groceries, do I have an expectation that cash will be coming my way at some point? Who makes important decisions about big issues like buying property or equipment or going into debt? What happens when someone wants to leave the business? Even if it's not on bad terms, like somebody decides they want to go to graduate school or, you know, um, pursue a new line of work. Now they want to become a florist. What's that process going to be like? What if we want to add someone to the business, especially if you are on your own and you're thinking, well, I'm going to start it out on my own, but I want to add someone later. What's that going to look like? And what do you want in terms of these questions when it comes time to add someone? How are we going to handle disputes? Are we just going to assume that we'll work it out? Uh, what if we can't work it out? How are we handling our annual budgeting, our financial procedures, and our governmental obligations? Who's in charge of those things? When do we talk about them? If all businesses talked about these things ahead of time, we would have a lot less failed businesses. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of when you are starting out digging into these issues. Jack and Jill, it's really easy to get caught up in the dream and to assume that you will deal with these things when they come. You can do that, and sometimes that works. But oftentimes, it works out much better if we think about these bad things before they happen. That's when we're in our clear mind and can come up with coherent strategies, and we're not burdened with the emotion of the anger or the disappointment or regret. These questions are answered in a little something called the governance document. You were maybe wondering, when does she get to the business structures point? I didn't come for therapy today. I didn't want to know about divorce. I wanted to know about forming a business structure. This does relate to the business structure, and it is the little something called the governance document. The single most important step farmers or business owners can make towards resiliency through business structures is writing the governance document. And I am going to switch my screen share and show you a little video we created that we think really helps emphasize that point. So bear with me while I put up a new screen here. And this is actually our website. It's the About Us page. So let's listen. Uh-oh, I just realized I didn't set up the sound. Well, you know what? I'm gonna have you do this on your own. You can go to our website, check out this video, and what you're going to see here, well, you're going to see me talking, but let me get to my farmers. I'll give you a little preview. This is Chris and some farmers that he's working with to process poultry together. The priority for Chris and his friends was remaining friends. They live in a small northern Wisconsin community, and they didn't want to end up hating each other because the town's too small for that, and because they really depend on each other as farmers. So what they did is they formed an LLC, and they wrote a good operating agreement together to make sure that if the end of the business came, that they could disband and go their separate ways without big problems. And you know what? It worked. It worked. Their business did not, they did decide to disband it a couple of years ago, and they were able to do that efficiently. And I'll also say before they disbanded it, they added a member, and that went well too. So check out that video along with a bunch of other videos that we have on farm law at our website when you have a chance. Otherwise, we will get back to our slides. The governance document goes by different names depending on the type of business structure that you have. If you have two people that are in business together and haven't formed a different business structure, you probably have a partnership. In that case, you just call it the partnership agreement. Pretty easy. If you have formed an LLC, it's called an operating agreement. If you formed a corporation, it's called the bylaws, and you might also have a shareholder agreement to discuss some of the other questions, like how do I sell my ownership? So here's where you really want to focus, is thinking about this governance document and writing a good one that works for you. But before we get to how to write one, let's say you're not ready. Like, I know, yes, I'd love to write one of those things, but that's a process. First, I have to talk about all of those things with my partner, with my mother, my that can be hard. In the meantime, what you need to know is that if you don't have a plan, if you haven't written one of these documents for yourself, don't worry, the state has a plan for you. The state has a set of default rules that will come into play if you have not chosen different rules for yourself. So let's say that you are in business with your brother, and your brother decides that he wants to go back to school and he wants out. If you don't have a governance document that you wrote together, you're going to rely on state law to tell you how you have to pay your brother for his share of the business. How long do you have to do it? What's the interest rate if you can't pay him in full in a short period of time? What kind of control does your brother have while he's transitioning out of ownership? You're going to have to look to state law to answer all of those questions. Those laws were written for businesses as a whole. It's one size fits all. This is the rule, and if you don't have the liquidity to actually pay your brother out in that period of time, there's not much we can do for you. So if you don't have a plan, the state has one for you, but you might not like the state's plan. That's why it's really to your advantage to think through these questions for yourself. And if something bad does happen and you didn't have one of these relationships, one of these documents, then you need to go to an attorney. That's when you really need someone to tell you, all right, let's look at what the default state rules are and let's figure out how they apply to your business. So if something disruptive happens, death, divorce, dispute, someone leaves the business, and you don't have one of these plans or you can't understand it, time for an attorney. And that does get expensive. You can try to work it out yourselves and come to an agreement with that person, but if you can't, that's really when we have to call in some other folks to help us. But you're attending this webinar and you're like, no worries, I'm going to draft one of those documents for myself. I'm going to answer those questions and I'm going to get a document in place. Awesome. I love it. We have something to help you with. So at our website, we have a free file that you can download. It's the Farmer's Guide to Business Structures. You can download it by PDF. You can also buy it, and I'm holding it up in front of my camera here. It is a big guide. It's 325 pages. So it's a big file. You can also pay $25 and buy it from SARE. We are not the publishers of this book, so you actually can't buy it directly from us. But SARE stands for Sustainable Agriculture, Research, and Education. You can buy it from them and they will send it to you through the mail. 25 bucks is a good deal. It's paperback, but it's also full color and it's nice to look at. What do you find in here? One of the most important things you'll find is a thorough list of questions to discuss with your partner or think about yourself when you are going to draft your governance document. That's the most important thing, is look through those questions and answer them in whatever normal, plain language you and your partner want to use to answer those questions. After you have answers to the basic questions that need to go into the governance document, well, then it's time to write the governance document. You can get a really strong head start. You don't need to go straight to an attorney, although you can. You can also choose to take a look at our samples. We have sample operating agreements and bylaws in here. I particularly like what we've done with this book because not only do we give you the sample language, we tell you exactly what it means and how you could think about adapting that to your situation. We have two sample agreements. One is for a husband and wife. And that one handles issues a little bit less thoroughly because marital law is going to supersede business law. So when we're talking about a husband and wife, there's only so much we can do with our governance document, because if we get divorced, marital law will supersede that. So we have one smaller, shorter operating agreement for your husband and wife folks or other married partners. And then we have a longer one that is modeled after three sisters who get into business together. There's no concerns about marital law, that's all business law. And so it's a bit more thorough. So check out those operating agreements and see what you think will work for you. Once you have really solid answers to the questions that we need to address in this document, then you are ready to put it in an official form. That's where you can go to an attorney if you want to put some polish on that thing. If you want to make sure that the answers you have drafted are thorough, that they're vetted, and that they will survive in court, go to an attorney. An attorney is going to review it and make sure that you have crossed the T's and dotted the I's. Not everyone thinks that that's an essential step. Some farmers think, I went to all this work to answer these questions. I think we're in a good spot now. I think we've come to a deep understanding that is going to help us prevent problems. And to some farmers, that's enough. It's an individual question, and it's one for you to decide for yourself if you want to take that document to an attorney to cross the I's and make sure that it's enforceable. If you choose not to go to an attorney, do bear in mind that your plain language might have forgotten something. There might be a conflict, and you might not be able to depend on it in court. But a lot of folks will tell me, look, I'm never going to sue my brother anyways. I'll hate him forever, but I'm not going to sue him. So they don't care if it's enforceable in court. Okay. If you farm with a partner, this is one of the most challenging action points that you'll encounter today. Next up, we will talk about which business structure to choose. Easy, so much easier than what I just talked about. So we got the hard stuff out of the way. Now we're going to talk about that easy stuff, which is which business structure do you want? We're also going to be talking about insurance. Also so much easier than thinking through these hard questions. Don't forget Farmer's Guide to Business Structures, issues to address, and sample governance documents. Okay, I'm going to pause here at our reflection moment and see do we have any questions? Don't forget about that chat box. Let us know what you are thinking and if this is making sense. While you're doing that, I'll touch on some questions that we received beforehand. So we had one question come in, and the person says, hey, we formed an LLC with the state, but we didn't create any other legal documents. Is that a problem? Is there a legal obligation to have other documents on file? The short answer is no. No. If you go and form an LLC with the state and you've gone through that process, you did it. You formed an LLC. You are not legally obligated to have the governance documents. They're optional. And that's because the state has a set of default rules that if you don't decide for yourself, they got a plan for you. It's highly recommended. That's what I've been talking about. It's highly recommended that you have this operating agreement that you wrote for yourselves that addresses your wishes for your business. But you are not legally obligated to have that. Now, I do want to dig into this question of legal obligations, though. When you form an LLC, one of the worst things you can do is fail to open a second bank account for that LLC. So again, this is not a legal obligation, but this is a highly recommended best practice. When you form an LLC or a corporation or any other entity, you need to separate the funds that belong to that LLC from the funds that belong to you personally. So I want to highly recommend that when you form an LLC or something else, you do a separate bank account and you have separate records that you are keeping for that business. Now, of course, most people are doing that because if you need financing, lending, if you have advisors, they want to see some financial reports. So you probably already have some books that you're keeping. This is more of an issue with farmers that get into the business aspects on a very casual basis. Maybe for 5 years or so, they're running this as a hobby farm. So they're running it out of their personal checking account. At some point, you got to cross the line from a hobby to a business. And when you do that, you need to stop running farm expenses out of your personal checking account and put them in another account. If you don't, if you want to rely on the protections of the LLC, you're going to have a hard time doing it. If the court sees that after you formed an LLC, you ran everything through the same bank account, they can ignore the LLC. Second part of this question, can we reasonably create some of these documents using free templates? Yes, you can go get our sample operating agreements, and you can reasonably use them to create your own. Like I said before, if you don't take that to an attorney, there's a chance that what you've done is not enforceable in court or that you built in a conflict or a problem. So know that and make the decision that's right for you if you want to take that to an attorney anyways. And make sure that it's going to be strong. Let's get on to that easy stuff, right? Choosing a business structure. Okay, so choosing a business structure is not complicated. We have one central question that we want to ask. Does this business structure protect personal assets from business liabilities? Your sole proprietorship and your partnership do not do that. If you have a sole proprietorship, your personal assets are exposed to business. Same with if you have a partnership. How do you know if you have these things? They're the default. If you woke up one day and started selling cherries off your tree and you didn't do anything else, you have a sole proprietorship. If you and your cousin started marketing apples at the end of the driveway when you were 8 years old, you formed a partnership. So in those relationships, your personal assets are exposed to business liabilities. A business liability is, a debt that you need to pay back. It is a penalty that you incurred. It is a liability like you made someone sick and they got a successful judgment against you. That means that they can come and take the things that you own personally to pay themselves back for the harm that they suffered. As you probably already know, the limited liability company and the corporation protect you from that. Your personal assets are protected from business liabilities. Sounds great, and it is, but it's not guaranteed. Like I said before, you need to separate your personal and business finances to further earn that protection. Form a separate bank account, keep a separate set of books. You also need to keep up your annual obligations with the state and the federal government. If you fail to let the state know that your LLC or corporation is active every year, or if you don't pay, if you don't file your taxes with the IRS, because yes, once you form one of these, you have to tell the IRS what you're doing with it every year. Failure to keep up those annual obligations can cause the state to dissolve your business structure, and then the protections will not be there for you. This also does not prevent you from extending a personal guarantee. Let's say you go to a lender and you say, I would love a loan. I can, look, my business is profitable. I can pay you back. I have cash flow. And they'll say, yeah, sure, but it's not enough. We want a personal guarantee too. Well, once you extend a personal guarantee, you have pledged your personal assets for that liability, that debt, and they can come and get your personal assets. LLCs and corporations are great, but not every farmer wants them. Not every farmer wants to carry 2 checkbooks around or wants to file paperwork with the state every year. Most farmers are okay with it, but that's just fine if somebody doesn't want to do it. It's better to not form an LLC than to form an LLC and then run it poorly, because then you're just wasting money. The thing's not going to be there for you when you need it. So if you do these things, then you have a reasonable assurance that your personal assets are protected. But let's talk about something else. Which of these entities, which of these structures protects business assets from business liabilities? None of them. Your business assets are always completely exposed to business liabilities. So if your apples make someone sick, even if you have an LLC, the aggrieved person can still take the apple washer, the apple harvester, the apple storage equipment, the truck with which you haul around your apples. What do farms have? For the most part, farms have business assets. Farmers are not in a position a lot of times to accrue personal assets. You know, the profitability of farming leaves it so that most of us don't have vacation homes, lots of nice stocks. We're mostly just plowing all that money back into the farm and building up our business assets. There is one way to protect your business assets, and that is insurance. So what's our key learning objective here? An LLC or a corporation is not a substitute for insurance. Insurance is essential and is perhaps even more essential than a business structure. The LLC or the corporation steps in to put the wall between personal and business. However, if most of your financial resources are going into your business, it's insurance. Insurance is what will preserve your wealth the best. Which brings up the question, what insurance do I need? Do I have the right insurance? We will get to that, but let me hang on this business structures thread a little bit longer, and we're going to get back to that question I haven't even addressed yet, LLC or corporation. Here we go. Do you want a corporation or do you want an LLC? You know, a lot of folks are like, LLCs are more flexible, right? That's what I want, right? That's what everybody does? The answer is yes, yes. LLCs are technically more flexible than corporations. An LLC can have more than 100 members. And your members can be other than actual real persons. They can be other LLCs, or they can be corporations. When you have an LLC, your operating agreement and officers are not required. You're not required to appoint the president, the treasurer, and the secretary. This is more flexible, but I am going to suggest to you that this is not that helpful. I don't know many farms that want more than 100 owners. That sounds like a problem. I also don't know many farms that are looking to be owned by other LLCs or corporations. Sometimes that can happen, but that's pretty rare. It sounds great not to have officers, but your attorney would suggest that you have an officer anyways. Why? It's because we need to appoint someone to help us make sure we're meeting our legal obligations. Think back about what I said about building in a structure to make important decisions like taking on debt or buying land or fulfilling your government obligations. It's really, really helpful if you say, look, the president, hey, your job every year is to make sure that our LLC renewal is filed. Hey, treasurer, it's your job to make sure that our tax return is filed every year on time. Officers are a really handy way to make sure that you are building in the accountability that you need to be successful as a corporation or an LLC. So are you required to do it? No. Are you better off when you do it? Yes. So again, I mean, these points of flexibility, sure, they're there, but they're not really compelling. Folks tend to make this decision on fees and convenience. Now, in Minnesota, the filing fees are the same for an LLC or a corporation. Annual reporting is the same for an LLC or a corporation. Now you got to go to your tax preparer or your accountant and say, look, I'm thinking of forming an LLC or a corporation. What do you charge for tax prep services for either of those? Or your accountant, what do you charge to like maintain my books for an LLC or a corporation? Is there any difference there? Some folks you know, they say, well, look, my dad has an LLC and he's pretty familiar with it and he's going to tell me about it, so I'm forming an LLC. That's great. It's a perfectly good reason to form an LLC as opposed to a corporation. They're kind of the same in all other ways. They're going to give you the same amount of protection in court, you know, same fees the state of Minnesota. The documents have different names, but it doesn't really matter. Go with what is cheapest or whatever you're most familiar with, or draw some straws. So that's the easiest answer I have for you today. Corporation or LLC, who cares? Just pick one. But what about the tax advantage? Wait, isn't there a tax advantage? You might have heard something about this. Yes. Now, there are tax savings that are available if you make more in personal income from farming than the average farmer in a similar position. And let's say you're thinking not farming, but you're like, well, I make cheese. There are tax savings available if you make more in personal income from cheese making than the average cheese maker in a similar position. So this tax advantage is a reason to form an LLC or a corporation, because both an LLC and a corporation can leverage this advantage. This is called being taxed under Subchapter S of the Federal Tax Code. Now, Subchapter S is named that way because technically it's written for the S corporation, but an LLC can also choose to be taxed under Subchapter S. You want to know money. You want to know, Rachel, what kind of dollars are we talking about? How big is this advantage? I have a nice graph to help you understand that. Let's pretend that the average farmer makes $30 annually, which unfortunately isn't pretending some years, but let's say a farmer may made $40 this year. If she is taxed as a partnership, the entirety of this tax is taxed at her income tax rate. Now, what tax rate is that? Well, it depends on how much income she has. Is she married? You know, is her husband's income or her spouse's income going on that tax return? We don't know. All we know is that she's going to be taxed at her regular income tax rate. If Farmer May chooses to be taxed under Subchapter S, the $30 will be taxed at her income tax rate, and then the extra $10 on the top, the extra that she's making over the average farmer, will be taxed at the dividends tax rate. Generally speaking, the dividends tax rate is lower. It might not be a lot lower. It all depends, because maybe May's regular income tax rate is already quite low. But if it's not, like if her spouse, you know, makes the big bucks, then she might have a higher income tax rate, and dividends, all of a sudden, the dividends tax rate is looking good, looking low. So it's a personal decision. It's a decision that you're best off making alongside the person who prepares your taxes, which I know might be you. So you might have to look at, you know, run a couple of different tax returns and try to assess this for yourself. And it can change each year. The bummer is you cannot flop back and forth between being taxed under Subchapter S and being taxed as a partnership. Once you go to be taxed under Subchapter S, you got to hang out there for a few years before you can switch back. So if you're not actually able to take advantage of this dividends tax rate because you're not making any more than the average farmer, you're stuck with some extra paperwork while you're still in Subchapter S. So this is the tax advantage, but it is for both LLCs and corporations. Okay. So I don't think we have any questions that have come in so far. I'm doing a lot of talking. I'm going to pretend that means I've answered all your questions rather than I've just confused you. But if I did, fill those in and I will keep going here. Okay. There's something you need to know about if you are a farm business and you're in Minnesota, which might be most of you. We have a little something called the Anti-Corporate Farming Law. This isn't unique to Minnesota. There are several Midwestern states, I think a dozen or so, that have these laws. They prohibit LLCs and corporations from leasing or owning farmland in some situations. So, but there are huge exceptions for this, and it is not likely to actually affect you if it's you and a family member, or you and just a few friends who are forming your LLC or a corporation. We have a flow chart. You can download it for free from our website, and I will also give you a quick look. I'll tell you, Minnesota loves a rule, as compared to like North Dakota or Wisconsin or some of the other places in which we do education. Minnesota kind of likes to complicate things, so they have a fairly robust flow chart that you're going to have to go through if you are looking at forming an LLC with people to whom you are unrelated. So if it's you and some friends, go through this and make sure that you aren't going to get in trouble. Some of the ways that this anti-corporate farming law can like get people when they're not expecting it is a situation like there was a food co-op in the Twin Cities that tried to buy some farmland. That's a problem. The food co-op has many owners, all of whom are unrelated. And even if that's not what the law is trying to prevent, but it is what it stops. So some people will say, well, that's a bummer. You know, there's nothing wrong with a food co-op trying to own some farmland. Well, it's against the law. So look at it if you're trying to do something that's pretty creative and getting a lot of unrelated people together. Okay, we have another question that was submitted beforehand. When and how should I form a second or a separate business entity? For example, let's say that right now I grow corn and I'm going to start a corn maze. Right now I grow berries and I want to do jam. Right now I have milk and I want to make cheese curds. I have a pumpkin patch, I'd like to do pumpkin cannons. I wouldn't suggest pumpkin cannons, but subject for another day. Consider a separate entity if the new venture involves two things. Number one, if it has distinct risks. And number two, if it involves distinct assets. Let's talk about those risks first. Growing corn and then having a corn maze absolutely adds distinct risks to your farm. Having a corn maze means, oh my goodness, hundreds of people coming in with their children, wandering through your fields, falling in holes, stuff that did not happen when you were just growing corn. If you're making jam, you know, before you were just sending those berries off and people consumed them, and sure, there was some risk that, you know, there's a pathogen on there, but now you're going into a kitchen and adding other ingredients and jarring them up and adding sugar. Those are distinct risks. You know, that processing, is there a flaw in the jars? Was there something in the sugar? You have additional risks you didn't have before. You know, same with the cheese and the cheese curds, the barn and the wedding. Yes, all distinct risks. Now let's talk distinct assets. For the most part, we're probably going to have distinct assets as well. We have our commercial kitchen for our jam operation. We have other infrastructure that we're going to be relying on when we start doing agritourism. We're going to need facilities to do parking and restrooms and things like that. So it doesn't have to be a $1 million building to be a distinct asset. And it's really, number one is really the most important one, distinct risks. When you have those elements, it is a very good idea to form a separate entity. What's going to happen when you form a separate entity is the risks that are attendant to the cheese curds. If one of those risks befall you, it will be the things with which you make the cheese curds that are exposed to that liability, but not the things with which you make the milk. Does that make sense? So you know, business assets are always available for business liabilities. So the business assets of the cheese curds are over here, and the business assets of just the milk are here. So someone gets sick from the cheese curds, they can still take the cheese curd assets, but only the cheese curd assets, not the milk assets. So that's the benefit of forming a separate entity. It's just sort of cordoning off assets that are going to be available when something bad happens just for that line of production. for that venture. But you know you're going to get insurance. So you know, like, okay, that's great that I have cordoned off certain assets, but really you're relying on insurance to protect you. So first thing you are going to do is go tell your insurance agent, I'm going to make some cheese curds. I'm going to open a corn maze and get that in place. Each farmer also needs to weigh the trade-off in terms of the additional costs of forming another business entity. You got to form a separate bank account. Now you have one for your milk and now you have one for your cheese curds. Maybe that's not a problem. Now you have 2 tax returns. It's a problem only if you say it is. So different farmers are going to come to different conclusions about whether and when to form a separate entity based on their own tolerance for paperwork and risk. Like I said, insurance is even more essential than a business structure. So how do you do that? What insurance do you need? If all you're doing is raw agricultural products that are sold wholesale, your standard farm liability policy is going to protect you. But if you're doing even something very nominally different, like selling at the farmer's market, doing U-Pick, adding value, you probably need something extra. You need an extra endorsement to cover those things particularly. If you're doing agritourism, food service, larger scale value added like cheese curds, you need a commercial policy. Your current insurance agent who sold you the farm liability policy may not be very skilled in commercial policies. So that's when it might be time to explore another agent or broker who can really help you get the right insurance for your expanded operations. How do you do that? Explain to your insurance agent or broker everything you are doing. Okay, I have a corn maze, but I also have a pumpkin patch, and I also have a hayride. Tell them all the things and do it in writing. Writing gives you that paper trail, like, look, I told you I had a hayride and you told me I had coverage for it. That's a good backup for you. And ultimately, you need to find an insurance agent you can trust, with whom you can build a long-term relationship. If you're not getting what you need from your insurance agent, you need another one. Talk to other farmers, those who have a business model that's similar to yours, and ask them, who do you use? Are you happy with them? Go to folks like Sustainable Farming Association or, CETA or anything like that and say, any insurance agents the folks have had success with. Now we had another question come up. What if I can't get insurance? This happens. This absolutely happens, especially for folks who are doing raw milk. I also see it with folks who are doing on-farm poultry processing and some types of agritourism. Insurance agents don't want to cover you. They think what you're doing is really risky. They're afraid. What can you do if you can't buy insurance? Number one, keep looking. Please keep looking. Find someone else who does that, and you're looking for the needle in the haystack, the person that will cover you. But yes, you can also form an LLC or a corporation, bearing in mind that you will still lose all of your business assets. And so, of course, do everything possible to minimize risk, knowing that you can be sued even if you're completely safe and wonderful and glorious. You can be sued to make you prove that you were safe and did everything right. So you are vulnerable when you cannot get insurance, and that's a hard spot. That's a tough spot to manage. Okay, I talked a lot. I think we have one question, and we're going to turn it over to you guys. Where is your greatest opportunity to create legal resilience for your farm right now? So reflect on that. And Courtney, do we have a question?
Yes, I actually asked the question.
All right.
Basically, I'm just asking about cooperatives. I've heard a lot more buzz recently of farmers forming cooperatives, and so I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on why that might be an advantage over other legal structures with multiple partners.
Right, right. Forming a cooperative is definitely better than forming a partnership. And that's what you've got. If you talk to another apple grower and you're like, you want me to drive your product into town? Do you want me to, make it available on my availability sheet, basically sell their product? You're forming a partnership. And then not only are your personal assets exposed to legal vulnerabilities, your personal assets are exposed to their business liabilities. So forming a cooperative or an LLC or anything else is really important when you're working with other people because of that like expansion of exposure. A cooperative does not necessarily have advantages over an LLC or a corporation inherently. It's all in how you agree to work together. A co-op, it has one member, one vote. So just because you invested more in the business doesn't mean you have greater control over it. To some folks, that's terrific. But also some people form LLCs and do that too. They also write into the operating agreement, just because you invested more doesn't mean you get more authority. Sometimes folks will do that when there's like one outgoing partner and one incoming partner. The outgoing guy or gal might have more money in the business, but they're trying to train in the incoming person. So they might want to make decision making equal while they are building their equity in that business. So cooperatives are great, and they also come with marketing benefits, but it's an individual decision for everybody. Farmer's Guide to Business Structures goes into detail on co-ops. It also goes into detail on nonprofits, which we did not touch on today. But if you're thinking, hey, can I do a nonprofit? Read this book, read that chapter for the details on when and how you can do that. Okay, other questions?
Thank you. Yeah, it looks like we have one from Melody asking, what would be the suggestion for a business with one person involved, myself, an LLC versus an S Corp?
Right. This is not a big decision. You can pick one. If you prepare your own taxes, I guess you can take a look at the tax returns. If you don't, ask about fees. Or if you work with an accountant, ask if they have any difference in fees that they charge for those things. It is just not, they're the same. And that's also the answer if it's not just you, but you have other partners. They're basically the same.
Can I make a comment on that real quick too?
Mm-hmm.
Just to add, you hit it right in the head, Rachel. Talk to your accountant too, because depending on how much revenue you have, you're going to have an option to file differently. For example, you can be an LLC and file as a corporation, but make sure to have that conversation with your accountant as well, because there are, as Rachel alluded to, some different exceptions to that. But that's all I have to add to that. I think you're right on the money. I would also talk to your accountant about the potential of that and what that threshold is for your business.
And if there is any reason why you may have another LLC or corporation that's going to want to come into ownership, you will have to have an LLC. I'm sorry. You will have to have an LLC if you want to have an owner who is not a natural person, as they call it. And so might as well form an LLC now so that you don't have to convert later on. Not likely, but possible. I see someone else commented that sometimes if you get a membership to an association, you might be able to get insurance through them. Absolutely, that is a good strategy. Some of the farmers markets work with the Minnesota Farmers Market Association, for example, and get access to insurance opportunities there. Farmers unions, Farm Bureau, great idea. So someone else says, I farm and offer custom butchery services and cannot get insurance for that part of my business. I hear you. That is a challenging thing to insure. I've been advised to have a lawyer write a hold harmless agreement. Will that actually provide protection? This is a situation where you do have to go to an attorney and pay the money for them to tell you if it will actually provide protection. So they're going to look at your specific situation. They're going to look at the case law and they're going to say, okay, this is challenging. We can write you a hold harmless agreement, but it might not actually work. Why would they do that? Well, they would still tell you to write a hold harmless agreement that won't actually work because it's a deterrent, because it's another hurdle for the aggrieved person to jump over when they're trying to get money from you. Not only are they going to have to prove, hey, you did something wrong that caused me to get harmed, they're going to have to prove, and that hold harmless agreement I signed is worthless. So you're putting one more barrier in their way to get a judgment against you. That barrier might be worth it to you, even if the agreement is worthless. And the only way to know is to go to an attorney. So, so that's, you know, I apologize. I hate when I have to offer complicated answers. But when you can't get insurance, sometimes a hold harmless agreement can be useful to create another barrier, but only if you actually went to the attorney who crafted the best possible agreement for your specific situation and advised you as to how stable, how resilient that document honestly is. For things like agritourism, you're going to have a better chance of being able to be successful with the hold harmless agreement. Butchery, I do not practice in that area. I suspect it might be harder. But it could be worth a couple $100 to talk with an attorney and say, ugh, should I? So would there be a template that would suffice in the case that it's a barrier only? If you use a template, it's not going to be a good barrier. If you go to an attorney, it'll be a much better barrier. So that's for you to decide. What exactly are you trying to do with this template? How much of a barrier do you want? How worth it is it to you? But assume if you got it online, it is not adapted to the state of Minnesota and it doesn't address the particular concerns, the particular avenues of liability that your particular system for offering custom butchery is going to incur. And Courtney, I know that we have hit our time, and I want to be mindful that you set aside an hour, and you may not have more time. So, so don't feel bad if you have to leave now. But happy to hang out and make sure that that all of your questions are answered. Farm Commons does work on business structures, but also on a lot of other things. We help folks with COVID relief programming. We're really good on employment law. Liability and insurance is a huge area of work for us. So now's your chance. If you have other questions, I'm going to be sitting here and I'm happy to help you figure out where you're at with other aspects of legal issues. At the same time, if you got to scoot on, I completely understand and thank you. I appreciate that you're thinking about these issues and you're wondering what you can do to be more resilient. We depend on you all to create rural areas that are worth living in, that we all love. And I know I sleep better at night when you guys are doing, when you guys are sleeping better at night. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your great questions. Well, it looks like we just had one more come in. What about liability for friends and kids come to recreate free of charge on your property near a trout stream, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what you're talking about there is not business. That's personal. When you and your friends and your kids come over, like for your kid's birthday party, something like that, that's homeowners stuff. You know, that's homeowners liability. So most of us have a homeowners liability policy because we have a mortgage and our bank requires us to have it. So, you know, if your kids come to recreate and injure themselves near a trout stream, it's possible that they're going to come to you and sue you in your personal capacity for that injury, and then you're going to go to your homeowner's insurance policy. Like, this stuff just happens. So so you know, even if for some reason you own your property outright and nobody is requiring you to carry homeowner's insurance, that's why you would do so anyways, is to be protected from friends and family. Now, that's not to say your friends and family are bad and they're going to sue you. It's not them. It's their health insurance company that's going to sue you. When we all buy health insurance, we sign over the right to sue in our own name for injuries that our health insurance company paid to treat. So when you read court cases on these things, you see things like mothers suing daughters and, you know, cousins suing aunts and uncles, and you're like, what kind of family is this? It's not them. The insurance company is doing that because they want to get paid back. So that's how this stuff happens. And you know, you'll get a call one day that's their insurance company calling to say, hey, what was little Johnny doing on your property? You know, tell us about that. That's what's happening. So if they come there because you hosted trout days for your agritourism operation, that's not personal. Now that's business because you're doing it as part of your agritourism operation. And there, when the health insurance company calls, you're going to be like, this was part of my business. This is my business insurance. And, you know, same procedure. You'll send them on to your insurance company. It'll just be for a different policy. Farm Commons has I think an 1.5 hour long tutorial on insurance. So it's a little bit different than what we talked about today, which really focused on business structures, but we go into more detail, and we also go into like property insurance, hoop houses, barns, things like that. So definitely check that out. Happy to take any more questions. If any of you are suffering due to COVID, keep in mind that if you haven't had a Paycheck Protection Program loan yet, and you have employees, you have until August 8th. So it's a forgivable loan. It's basically free money from the government. So look into that. If you have employees or if you showed a profit on your 2019 tax return and you are suffering due to COVID. We have webinars on our website that'll help you figure out how to apply for that program. The window closes soon.
That's a great reminder, Rachel. Thank you. Yeah, and I would just say, again, you know, to make sure that everyone's checking out Farm Commons website. They have a lot of really interesting videos and resources, and I learned a lot just by kind of taking a couple minutes to poke around. So I would definitely encourage folks, and also just a reminder too that at CETA, I have several colleagues who are here on the line, and we're happy to help with any questions you might have on the PPP or any other business assistance. And we have the HEN program right now where you can get a free business coach. And so if you are interested in that, you can visit our website, cetausa.com, and we're happy to help. And this has been so great. I've really appreciated all the questions. If there are, you know, if you're maybe later in the day today, you're thinking, oh gosh, I wish I would have asked that, or I wish I would have, you know, looked at that, feel free to email me. I'm going to put my my information in the chat here, and then I can kind of help you get directed towards the right resource. We want to make sure that we're providing support, even if folks are not able to think of questions right now. But we've had a great discussion, and there's nothing else going on.
Thanks, everybody. It was good to talk with you.
Great job.
Thank
Really
you,
good job.
everyone.